1 Kings 6. The building of the temple. Now it came about in the 480th year after the sons of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziv, that is, the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. And the house which King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits in its length, and 20 cubits in its width, and its height was 30 cubits. The porch in front of the main room of the house was 20 cubits in length, corresponding to the width of the house, and its width along the front of the house was 10 cubits. Also for the house he made windows with artistic frames. Against the wall of the house he built stories encompassing the walls of the house around both the main room and the inner sanctuary. So he made side chambers all around. The lowest story was 5 cubits wide, the middle was 6 cubits wide, and the third was 7 cubits wide, for on the outside he made offsets in the wall of the house all around so that the beams would not be inserted into the walls of the house. The house, while it was being built, was built of stone finished at the quarry, and neither hammer nor axe, nor any iron tool was heard in the house while it was being built. The doorway for the lowest side chamber was on the right side of the house, and they would go up by a winding staircase to the middle story, and from the middle to the third. So he built the house and finished it, and he covered the house with beams and planks of cedar. He also built the stories against the whole house, each 5 cubits high, and they were attached to the house with timbers of cedar. Now the word of the Lord came to Solomon, saying, As for this house which you are building, if you will walk in my statutes and execute my ordinances and keep all my commandments by walking in them, then I will fulfill my word with you which I spoke to David your father. And I will dwell among the sons of Israel, and will not abandon my people Israel. So Solomon built the house and finished it. He built the walls of the house on the inside with boards of cedar. From the floor of the house to the ceiling he paneled the walls on the inside with wood, and he paneled the floor of the house with boards of juniper. He also built 20 cubits on the rear part of the house with boards of cedar from the floor to the ceiling. He built them for it on the inside as an inner sanctuary, as the most holy place. The house, that is, the main room in front of the inner sanctuary, was 40 cubits long. There was cedar inside the house, carved in the shape of gourds and open flowers. Everything was cedar, there was no stone visible. Then he prepared an inner sanctuary inside the house in order to place there the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. The inner sanctuary was 20 cubits in length, 20 cubits in width, and 20 cubits in height, and he overlaid it with pure gold. He also paneled the altar with cedar. So Solomon overlaid the inside of the house with pure gold, and he extended chains of gold across the front of the inner sanctuary, and he overlaid it with gold. He overlaid the entire house with gold, until all the house was finished. Also the entire altar which was by the inner sanctuary he overlaid with gold. And in the inner sanctuary he made 2 cherubim of olive wood, each 10 cubits high. The one wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits, and the other wing of the first cherub was 5 cubits. From the end of one wing to the end of the other wing were 10 cubits. The second cherub was 10 cubits. Both of the cherubim were of the same measurement and the same form. The height of the one cherub was 10 cubits, and so was that of the other cherub. He placed the cherubim in the midst of the inner house, and the wings of the cherubim spread out so that the wing of the one was touching the one wall, and the wing of the other cherub was touching the other wall, and their wings were touching end to end in the center of the house. He also overlaid the cherubim with gold. Then he carved all the surrounding walls of the house with engravings of cherubim, palm trees and open flowers, for the inner and outer sanctuaries. And he overlaid the floor of the house with gold, for the inner and outer sanctuaries. And for the entrance of the inner sanctuary he made doors of olive wood, the lintel and 5-sided doorposts. So he made 2 doors of olive wood, and he carved on them carvings of cherubim, palm trees and open flowers, and overlaid them with gold, and he overlaid the cherubim and the palm trees with gold. So too he made for the entrance of the main room 4-sided doorposts of olive wood, and 2 doors of juniper wood. The 2 leaves of the one door turned on pivots, and the 2 leaves of the other door turned on pivots. He carved on it cherubim, palm trees and open flowers, and he overlaid them with gold plated on the carved work. And he built the inner courtyard with 3 rows of cut stone and a row of cedar beams. In the 4th year the foundation of the house of the Lord was laid, in the month of Ziv. And in the 11th year in the month of Bul, that is, the 8th month, the house was finished in all its parts and in accordance with all its plans. So he was 7 years in building it. 1 Kings 7. Solomon's palace. Now Solomon built his own house over the course of 13 years, and he finished all of his house. He built the house of the timber from Lebanon. Its length was 100 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits, on 4 rows of cedar pillars with cedar beams on the pillars. And it was paneled with cedar above the side chambers which were on the 45 pillars, 15 in each row. There were artistic window frames in 3 rows, and window was opposite window at 3 intervals. And all the doorways and doorposts had squared artistic frames, and window was opposite window at 3 intervals. Then he made the hall of pillars. Its length was 50 cubits and its width 30 cubits, and a porch was in front of them and pillars and a threshold in front of them. And he made the hall of the throne where he was to judge, the hall of judgment, and it was paneled with cedar from floor to floor. And his house where he was to live, the other courtyard inward from the hall, was of this same workmanship. He also made a house like this hall for Pharaoh's daughter, whom Solomon had married. All of these were made of valuable stones, of stone cut according to measure, sawed with saws inside and outside, even from the foundation to the coping, and from the outside to the large courtyard. And the foundation was of valuable stones, large stones, stones of 10 cubits and stones of 8 cubits. And above were valuable stones, cut according to measure, and cedar. So the large courtyard all around had 3 rows of cut stone and a row of cedar beams, as well as the inner courtyard of the house of the Lord, and the porch of the house. Hiram's work in the temple. Now King Solomon sent word and had Hiram brought from Tyre. He was a widow's son from the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, an artisan in bronze, and he was filled with wisdom, skill, and knowledge for doing any work in bronze. So he came to King Solomon and performed all his work. He fashioned the 2 pillars of bronze. 18 cubits was the height of each pillar, and a line of 12 cubits measured the circumference of both. He also made 2 capitals of cast bronze to put on the tops of the pillars. The height of the one capital was 5 cubits and the height of the other capital was 5 cubits. There were lattices of latticework and wreaths of chainwork for the capitals which were on the top of the pillars, 7 for the one capital and 7 for the other capital. So he made the pillars, and 2 rows around on the one lattice to cover the capitals which were on the top of the pomegranates. And so he did for the other capital. The capitals which were on the tops of the pillars in the porch were of lily design, for cubits. So there were capitals on the 2 pillars, also above and close to the rounded projection which was beside the lattice, and the pomegranates totaled 200 in rows around both. Capitals. And he set up the pillars at the porch of the main room. He set up the right pillar and named it Jachin, and he set up the left pillar and named it Boaz. On the top of the pillars was the lily design. So the work of the pillars was finished. He also made the sea of cast metal 10 cubits from brim to brim, circular in shape, and its height was 5 cubits, and it was 30 cubits in circumference. Under its brim gourds went around encircling it 10 to a cubit, completely surrounding the sea. The gourds were in 2 rows, cast with the rest. It was standing on 12 oxen, 3 facing north, 3 facing west, 3 facing south, and 3 facing east. And the sea was set on top of them, and all their rear parts turned inward. And it was a hand-width thick, and its brim was made like the brim of a cup, like a lily blossom. It could hold 2,000 baths. Then he made the 10 stands of bronze. The length of each stand was 4 cubits, its width 4 cubits, and its height was 3 cubits. This was the design of the stands. They had borders, that is, borders between the crossbars, and on the borders which were between the crossbars were lions, oxen, and cherubim, and on the crossbars there was a pedestal above, and beneath the lions and oxen were wreaths of hanging work. Now each stand had 4 bronze wheels with bronze axles, and its 4 feet had supports. Beneath the basin were cast supports with wreaths at each side. And its opening inside the crown at the top was a cubit, and its opening was round like the design of a pedestal, a cubit and a half, and on its opening also there were engravings, and their borders were square, not round. The 4 wheels were underneath the borders, and the axles of the wheels were on the stand. And the height of a wheel was a cubit and a half. The workmanship of the wheels was like the workmanship of a chariot wheel. Their axles, their rims, their spokes, and their hubs were all cast. Now there were 4 supports at the 4 corners of each stand. Its supports were part of the stand itself. And on the top of the stand there was a circular form half a cubit high. And on the top of the stand its stays and its borders were part of it. And he engraved on the plates of its stays and on its borders cherubim, lions and palm trees, as there was clear space on each, with wreaths all around. He made the 10 stands like this. All of them had the same casting, same measure and same form. And he made 10 basins of bronze, each holding 40 baths. Each basin was 4 cubits, and on each of the 10 stands was 1 basin. Then he placed the stands, 5 on the right side of the house and 5 on the left side of the house, and he set the sea of cast metal on the right side of the house eastward toward the south. Now Hiram made the basins and the shovels and the bowls. So Hiram finished doing all the work which he performed for King Solomon in the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls of the capitals which were on the top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 lattices to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals which were on the top of the pillars, and the 400 pomegranates for the 2 lattices, 2 rows of pomegranates for each lattice to cover the 2 bowls of the capitals which were on the tops of the pillars, and the 10 stands with the 10 basins on the stands, and the 1 sea and the 12 oxen under the sea, and the buckets, the shovels and the bowls. Indeed, all these utensils which Hiram made for King Solomon in the house of the Lord were of polished bronze. The king had them cast in the plain of the Jordan, in the clay ground between Succos and Zarethan. However, Solomon left all the utensils unweighed because they were too many. The weight of the bronze could not be determined. Solomon also made all the furniture that was in the house of the Lord, the golden altar and the golden table on which was set the bread of the presence, and the lampstands of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left, in front of the inner sanctuary, and the flowers, the lamps and the tongs of gold, also the cups, the shears, the bowls, the ladles and the firepans of pure gold, and the hinges both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house, that is, for the main room, of gold. So all the work that King Solomon performed in the house of the Lord was finished. And Solomon brought in the offerings vowed by his father David, the silver and the gold and the utensils, and he put them in the treasuries of the house of the Lord.